Good evening and happy Groundhog Day. According to the news report this morning, Groundhog did not see his shadow, so we're going to be blessed with an early spring. So that will make your job a little easier, Mr. Clardy. We'll get some of these projects a little further along. So that's great news. So welcome to the work session. Chairman Hodge is going to lead us in the pledge this evening.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. And we will we'll do the moment of silence on Thursday. I think we'll have probably a couple of people to mention. The agenda, questions, comments? Remind you that we'll be meeting tomorrow night for our regular board meeting instead of Thursdays. So we'll be back together pretty quick. Okay. The consent agenda. Questions, comments, discussion? Visitors will be on tomorrow night. Spotlight on Education with Laverne High School and dual enrollment.
Better bring your tissue for that. I've seen the video. It's really impressive. You're going to be. It's the students and what this meant to them. So you're going to enjoy it.
Mr. Holliday was very involved in that program.
Number 8 under facilities 8A. What they're seeking is really the concept. They haven't started the fundraising yet, so I'll just kind of tell you that on the front end. This is a Blackman High School Junior ROTC building, multi-use building. A presentation will be made by Colonel Houchins and Colonel Spry on a concept for the fundraising and construction of an approximately 70 feet by 100 feet pre-engineered metal building to be used by Blackman JROTC and other school-related activities. Dr. Justice has requested approval for this concept, and the Engineering and Construction Department has helped choose the site, location, and utility paths. The Construction and Engineering Department will bring this project back for final approval of construction once plans are developed and funds are in place. The entire project will be funded by Blackman JROTC fundraising at no cost to the Rutherford County School Board. Recommend approval. The motion is to approve the concept of a JROTC multi-use building at Blackman High School for the purpose of planning and fundraising for the project as presented. The entire project will be planned and constructed at no cost to the school board.
Pretty good sized building too.
Mr. Clardy knows more about it if you want to ask tonight some more.
Just in a work session kind of perspective, we're talking about the concept. I'm pretty sure this is our first JROTC building. And so what is the conceptual use of the interior of this building, and why a building versus, I mean, I get the outdoor obstacle courses, things that we're accustomed to seeing. This one's new. What are we going to do with it?
There'll be competition for JROTC. There'll also be some drill pads outside for drill competition. They will move their shooting into that building. It'll be long enough to shoot, and that will move it out of the gym. Discussing it with Colonel Houchins, they expect that other schools in the county will use it also for competitions and those types of things. There'll be some things such as cheerleading practice and those types of things in there that normally take place inside the rotunda there at Blackman. So there's all kinds of those things they've planned to use for. It's just a metal pre-engineered building on a concrete slab, and it'll be heated and air conditioning. And the restrooms won't go in right now, but they'll go in at some other point in time. And they're just wanting, before they start developing the plans and those types of things, they just want the blessings of the school board so that they don't come in later on and then something is changed or shot down.
I guess one idea that I have and thought, this is not a facility that we would say is hardened, is not attached to the school, security protocol and all of those kind of things, and yet it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibilities that during the regular school day, we might find some type of activity taking place out there in that building. Is there a reason for us to consider, rather than a pre-engineered building, and I understand there's a financial burden here, but is there a reason for us to consider we need to just build a 70 by 100 extension onto the school?
I think it becomes more complicated that way for us to get into that. Of course, once they get this built, it will become property of the county, but it's also set back from the school. It'll have to be set back 50 feet from the school, at least according to the fire marshal, or the life safety stuff will have to be connected into the system of the school.
Right.
So I just think that they'll have to maintain it, they'll have to keep it up, they'll have to plan all the activities and those types of things. So in my mind, I think it's better, once we get into it, if we build the way we build and those types of things, then the cost goes up on it, and I don't know if they'll be able to fund it or not.
I totally understand. I guess really the point that I'm trying to make here is that we absolutely know that when students engage in JROTC, as well as many other programs, but when they're engaged in these programs, graduation rates go through the roof. JROTC, if I'm not mistaken, was either 99 or 100% graduation rate, 100% at some of our schools, just by their involvement in that program. And it may be that as we plan forward, that a facility that is adequate for this type of use for JROTC, as we plan perhaps the next high school, that we need to consider this as a design modification, that a facility of this type of description is part of the plan. I understand in this application, it's probably the right thing to use the pre-engineered metal building. It keeps the cost down and all those kind of things. But I don't want to let this just pass and it become the norm and the standard that JROTC, which guarantees us a near 100% graduation rate, is not something that we should, keep away from a board investment.
I believe the population of the JROTC at Blackman is about 10% of the student body.
It's another reason. I want it to be a very, very useful facility, and I know it's most useful when it's connected, but the expense is extreme when we connect it to all of those life and safety facilities and all that kind of stuff. So just didn't want it to go without consideration.
I will say that in Stewart's Creek High School, we did make some special concessions to what we'd been doing in ROTC so that we could allow them more space and more classrooms in those types of areas. Of course, there's no drill areas. I know they've set up their own course outside the school and those types of things, but we have kind of moved to try to help them out a little bit in the past.
I don't think we ever would have thought to ourselves that a shooting range was something that we needed in a high school, but we're seeing it through the archery program at some of our schools, and now this facility. How we do that appropriately, safely, adequately, and the multi-use of that, it's something we should plan and just make sure we stay on that leading edge.
There's skeet shooting clubs, too.
I don't think we're going to get that inside the building, though.
It's not.
Outstanding.
Excellent program. Okay.
B.
B.
We're trying to close out Eagleville, so this is Eagleville Phase 1 deductive change order. The final cost for the Phase 1 Eagleville School additions and renovations project from the general contractor, Robert S. Biscayne Company, is $5,356,100. The bid amount for the project was $5,415,100. The final change order, a deductive change order number 1, amount is a credit of $59,000. The project is complete with the exception of a minor warranty issue with the roof. Recommend approval. A motion to approve the final deductive change order from Robert S. Biscayne Company on Eagleville Phase 1 for a credit in the amount of $59,000.
The Phase 2 and Phase 1.
We did Phase 2 before we.
Yeah.
Phase 2 had a lot of the classrooms, if you remember. Really, Phase 1 was a little more expensive because it was the auditorium, cafeteria changes, things like that. So at the time we were sandwiching it in, we did 2 before we did 1.
That confuses a lot of people.
It does.
Always nice to get money
Credit.
back, Mr. Clardy. You made a habit of that. So on behalf of the board, thank you.
Very welcome. Try to manage it well.
Yes, sir. The warranty issue with the roof, are you able to share that with us?
It's just some minor details that, flashing and different things that they need to, like some caulking issues and that type of
Oh,
thing.
okay. So nothing,
We don't have any major leaks or anything, it's just that, we're holding a little money until that gets resolved.
a little leverage, I guess you would say.
The one with the money has the power.
Thank you. Anybody else? C.
C is the Rocky Fork site clearing change order. Bomar Construction Company has submitted the final change order for the Rocky Fork site clearing contract. The cost includes surveying additional detention area with non-porous baffle and cemetery survey evaluation and grave count for a total of $101,436.74. The board approved the contingency of $140,000 at the time the bid was approved. So this change order comes out of the amount leaving a balance of $38,563.25 to go towards site development. Recommend approval. The motion to approve Rocky Fork site clearing change order to Bomar Construction Company in the amount of $101,436.75. Remember, we separated the pad from the clearing because that particular piece of property and trees and all, it was where do we locate the detention pond and several other factors, and there were some cemetery lots come up, so we've got a solution, I think, for that. And so we actually separated that this time because of that particular piece of property.
Comments? D.
D is Eagleville property. Mr. John L. Turner is in the process of donating another acre of property to Rutherford County Schools adjacent to the 3 acres that we recently acquired from him at the west of the school and adjacent to the county EMS building. Eagleville High School football is currently using it for a practice field. Mr. Turner is in the process of having the other acre surveyed at this time. This will make a total of 4 acres at that site. During Assistant Superintendent Clardy's negotiations with Mr. Turner, He has offered just under another acre for a sale at a price of $40,000 per acre. The engineering and construction department thinks this would be a good deal for the county in case there is need for an annex building on the Eagleville campus at some time in the future. The added up to approximately acre would bring that total tract size to approximately 5 acres. Before I read the motion, if you take all 5 acres and what he donated to us, it comes down about $16,000 an acre, maybe, total. So he's been very good to us overall with the gift and that part. So recommend approval. The motion is to approve purchase of just less than 1 acre of property to Mr. John L. Turner adjacent to the recently acquired tract for the amount of $40,000 per acre. Mr. Jeff Reed will handle the purchase and closing, and funds will come from the Rutherford County Schools account number 76100, other capital outlay.
And this is adjacent and ties into the regular school property too, so.
No, sir. It's ready to go for practice field. It's in good shape.
It's road frontage and it's flat. We'll have another opportunity tomorrow evening if a question comes to mind on any of these issues. Number 9, Ms. Barnes, insurance update.
In your package, you have 2 pieces of paper. The first one is the report that Mr. Sanders put together after each of our insurance committee meetings that summarizes the medical insurance trends for the month of December comparison from 2014 to 14 to 15. We had an increase in the self-funded plan at 17.10%. And then self-funded and the on-site medical combined was 7.96% increase over last year. And then we had 4 worker comp injuries during the month of December. But the next page is something we are happy to share some very good information here. As you know, each year we do a wellness campaign, the Know Your Numbers campaign, and the committee has made the recommendation, which all of this will go forward to the Budget Committee and then to the full commission for approval, that we set the dates each year from January 1st of that year to September 30th of that same year, so that that completion period will not overlap with open enrollment and be confusing to our employees. This past year, those dates overlapped, and there was some confusion as to what had to be done by what date. So they've set those dates now, so hopefully Know Your Numbers, and then open enrollment will be 2 separate events. The second recommendation that's going forward, in the Rutherford County Retirement Medical Plan Eligibility Document, the bulleted sections currently says that participation in the medical plan as defined in the requirements has been changed from the years immediately prior and leading up to retirement to non-consecutive years on the plan. Ms. Street explained this at our meeting. This year, when we changed the spouse eligibility requirements, we had several employees who opted to move off of our plan and join their spouse's plan. So what that did in the current or previous language now, a person had to be on our medical plan in the years leading up to retirement. They had to have, let's say, 15 years on the plan, currently on the plan. Well, now, if I came off the plan and came back on, as long as I had 15 non-consecutive years, I would still be eligible for this retirement benefit to continue to stay on our plan after I retire. So it's really a good move, a good change for our employees. It allows them much more flexibility. And again, that will go to the full commission. And then the last thing, and Mr. Blair may talk a little bit more about this because he sat on the selection committee for the broker of record or consultant, and that bid was recommended for the Willis Company. And again, we had presentations at the insurance committee from Willis and another company, and the vote was unanimous to recommend Willis for this position.
And Willis was unanimous in the advisory committee selection, and then went to the insurance committee, which Ms. Barnes and Mr. Sandvig are members. And we interviewed 4 different companies. Cowan, the present advisor or broker, Highland, Mercer, and Willis. And they all made exceptional presentations, but I think we were all very impressed with Willis. Also, with the programs that they were offering concerning the wellness opportunities for our employees. Plus, they have a team of attorneys familiar with the ERISA statutes or federal regulations, and that was going to be very helpful. But the neat thing for me was coming away from the meeting with Ms. Street was, of course, involved, and Ms. Stevenson, and I was very pleased with the detailed questions they asked and the concern they had for our employees, because they were looking after them, and that's what we expect. But sometimes I think we get wrapped up and we really don't know that these individuals are there for our people, and I came away with a strong feeling that they are there to help, and just with this recommendation number 2, that revision, that was something Ms. Street came and proposed, and that's something that's really good for our people with the health insurance. So it was just, not to mention that we were going to save a couple of $100,000. Either didn't hurt, but I think if it had been a tie, I think we would have still chosen Willis because of their presentation. Was that the feeling you got from the presentation, Ms. Barnes?
Yes, it was, absolutely.
But Willis will come into it with a very objective attitude, and they do not have any, I guess you call them contingency overrides, so which gives them the opportunity to be very objective. Two of the other presenters had contingency overrides, which they would have accepted money from the carrier, which Willis does not. Does that explain it pretty well, Ms. Barnes?
Very good job, Mr. Blair, thank you.
Yes, Mayor Burgess kind of surprised me. I just was a member of the advisory committee, and he asked me to come up and be the spokesperson for that committee, and I feel like I was the one that should be doing the talking, but we had a great committee, and I was pleased that the insurance committee agreed with our recommendation unanimously as we did.
The insurance department within the last week did send out to everyone, it's a county employee, I guess, the ACA form. You have to prove you have health insurance. We did send to our employees a separate email and say, this is not your W-2, don't throw it away or anything. It's your proof that you're carrying insurance. So people received that this last week to file their income tax with.
You kind of need that little form, don't you, to forego that penalty?
It is.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes. You won't be called on tomorrow night. You got that out of the way for yourself.
Thank you.
Chairman Hodge, you're going to wait till Thursday to talk about Wednesday? Yeah, tomorrow night.
I'll just make a couple comments. I think everyone has a couple different copies in your folders there. I'll just make mention of a couple of them, and you can look at all the rest of them, look them up or whatever. On page 3 there, just some something interesting to look at is House Bill 1638, out of Knox County. Everyone may just want to read that and formulate your own opinion on it, but it's something else that somewhere else could come down the pike and cost the school system more money, cost counties more money, so I did, just for reading purposes, maybe look at that, and then, also I'll mention, the voucher bill, House Bill 1049. I think it's coming up tomorrow or Thursday, one of the two. You know, Mr. Odoms, Thursday. So based on the article I saw in the paper Friday, I guess from the meeting with REA, it looked like the only representative we've got, only legislator I guess we've got that's hadn't made up their mind, would be Representative Terry. So, if you want to shoot him an email or whatever, we may have some hope with him on that, but that's just a thought, if you want to do it, so. But other than that, like I said, look over some of these, and if we want to talk about them tomorrow night, we can, but, like I said, I think the biggest one that we got is the voucher bill. But I will say, if you look over on the last 3 pages on the fiscal summary, you may read over all that stuff, but I think it'll bring things to light a little bit more. But if you look at the last paragraph that on page 3, where it's highlighted, down in the bold section, based on reading that, out of each year's scholarships on this, I think we're pretty well assured that if the thing does go through, that all the money's going to be used. If you just read that paragraph, that not just the counties that they're targeting, we could have counties around us using that money. So I just think that's, we've been told it's not going to get up here and all this stuff, but based on that, there's a good chance it could. So other than that, I don't have anything else to report.
It just makes you wonder the thought process of how an economically disadvantaged student is going to take $6,000 and utilize that in a private school that may cost anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000 a year, probably on the low side. So, sorry. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I mean, that's probably the example I was using, probably one of the lowest in the state. But even the lowest in the state, how does that, how does that help an economically disadvantaged child? Ms. Moore?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And if you don't mind, I know we're going to talk about this more tomorrow, but the voucher bill is of very significant concern to me, as I know it is many of you. And I certainly don't feel like we've got to educate any of you or anybody in our audience. And I don't know how many viewers we're going to have on television tomorrow or the rest of the day on Wednesday, but it is my understanding that the voucher bill is coming up for a vote on Thursday. And one of I think out of all the topics that have been brought to me by constituents over the last 2 years, aside from maybe Common Core and the textbooks, is the question about vouchers. And it's become so apparent to me as I've talked with fellow parents, teachers, PTO people, that these voucher bills are unfortunately not nearly as well understood as they should be. And based on the way our legislators have been handling it, it really makes me question how well they truly understand it as well. It certainly hasn't been from lack of our local school boards trying. Of course, we've met along with the city school board with our legislators several times and explained to them our concerns about why vouchers are not the right route. And sadly, it seems to have pretty much fallen on deaf ears. And I guess I just kind of want to reiterate again, for some of the folks, and if by any chance any of our legislators decide they want to watch our work session from tonight before the bill goes for a vote on Thursday, that, the premise of the vouchers, of course, from the supporters side of it is really kind of, I think, twofold. It's, it's help the special needs child or the underprivileged child that's going to a failing school to be able to get them into what supposedly is going to be a better school environment for them. To me, I guess from just a really simplistic way of looking at it, it makes absolutely no sense why we would take state, local, and federal tax dollars that we're paying in and use those to send children to private school. And I want to make sure I'm not misunderstood here. I have absolutely no objection to private schools whatsoever. I fully support parents' choice in terms of if they choose to send their child to a private school or even to homeschool them. I think it's fabulous. However, should our taxpayer dollars go to invest and fund that? And when you look at the history that has happened across the country with some of the voucher plans that have been put into place, I haven't seen any that I've looked at yet that have been what anybody would refer to as a success, much less a resounding success. And the negative aspect of it is, again, and when we look at the numbers, we're talking about millions of dollars being pulled out of our public schools and funneled into private schools where I understand, again, if I'm a parent of a special needs child or I'm a parent of a child going to a badly failing school in Shelby County, we don't have those schools here in Rutherford County, and that's another thing that I would ask our legislators to stop and think about what's best for Rutherford County as well. I understand they've got to look at the whole state, but Rutherford County has one of the best school systems in the state, and it's not, to me, it's not applicable here. But it's like you pointed out, Mr. Chairman, you've got students that in these low-income, failing schools that, okay, so let's say we're going to give them, or the state's going to give them $3,000 worth of voucher money to go to a private school. That tuition is $8,000 or $10,000. Are those parents even going to be able to afford to send them to begin with? And in most cases, the answer is no. They can't afford the tuition. They can't afford the transportation that they have to undertake. And so what happens then to that voucher money? My understanding is, in most cases, that the voucher money actually goes back kind of into the pool, and it's opened up for use for other students, I guess, depending on other categories. So I understand that a lot of our legislators are coming back with well, it's just for these children. It's best for the children. This is what's good for the children. Well, again, I would purport it's not what's best for those children. Many of the private schools we're learning do not have the resources in place to take care of severely challenged special needs children. And from a parent's perspective, to me, I would ask the parents to stop and think about, okay, so you've got voucher money now to take your child to private school, and maybe or maybe not you can afford the rest of the tuition. Let's say you come up with it. Maybe you get a scholarship. You get to take your child to school there. What happens when 2 months down the road you find out that private school isn't capable of taking care of your child any better than the public school that they were in? What happens then? What are your choices? Well, their choice is they can pull their child out of that private school because the private school doesn't have to answer to that parent about how they run their school. We as a school board have a responsibility and obligation to answer to our parents. We're publicly funded. We're a public school. So we would take the child back, I assume, right? And again, my understanding is the voucher money that's already been paid out for that year would still stay at the private school. We're not going to be able to pull it back. So we're in essence taking away funds from other students as well that we need to run our schools. And I would purport that the effort and energy and the dollars that are being poured into this, and there are big dollars being poured into it, and I want to address that here in just a second, could be much better utilized by addressing the concerns that we have with those schools that are failing and fixing them. And we have too many public schools in this state that are shining examples, like Rutherford County, of the fact that they can be fixed and they can be made right. So to me, this is a Band-Aid that they're trying to put on something that in some cases is severely bleeding. It's not going to help. I have to ask myself why, too, after learning about all of the private interest organizations that are funding the voucher bills and are lobbying our legislators on the Hill daily, why? They're pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, into campaign accounts. And I'm just going to tell it like it is. I mean, you all know me well enough to know I'm not going to pull any punches, and when I feel strongly about something, I'm going to speak it. These private interest groups are just that. They're private interest groups. And it begs the question of, is it really about the student, or is it really about the dollars that are going to come out of privatizing? They like to use the argument, well, public schools should be challenged. They should have to rise to the occasion and have competition like in general business. That's not the way to do it. And you stop and think about that and wonder why they're pouring all these dollars into these legislatures' campaign accounts. What do they have to gain from it? And then you look at the public schools and the fact that we don't really have an opportunity to have that voice. I mean, I can imagine our county commissioners, if we decided to bring a budget to them, that we wanted $250,000 next year to pay a lobbyist to go to the Hill to fight the battle that our legislators should be listening to their local school board on to begin with. So I think people need to educate themselves, and I pray that our legislators are going to really look at the true meaning and design of these vouchers and perhaps might see their way to do something different on Thursday.
Well said. Thank you. Jordan.
That's pretty strong, isn't it? And pretty right. I hope you got all that, Mr. Wilson. I'm sure you did. If not, she'll be glad to repeat it for you. I do want to say, I want to add one thing, and she said this, by the way, but I'm going to say it a different way. We had a committee of legislators that went to Memphis very recently, and then according to the newspaper, I believe this would be one out of Nashville, which of course is not near the quality of the one here locally, but they were talking about that they were appalled at the conditions of some of the schools in Memphis. That's a lie. They know very well that they've closed 20 of the schools. And the second thing I want to say, just in support of what she just said, which was terrific, is it's not the job of the Rutherford County or Murfreesboro taxpayer to fix the Memphis schools. That's Memphis's problem, and it's the state's problem.
I said better myself. Mr. Young?
And then also, what are they going to do with the failing schools? After those kids come out of the schools, what are they going to do with those schools? There's just a lot of questions that still needs to be answered before our guys could even consider voting. And, that's all I'm asking for them to do, is come down here and talk to us, we'll debate them, whatever we need to do, but they need to show us data where they're getting their facts. And their facts are not lining up with the facts I'm seeing. I've got a whole folder of facts here that shows that these things have failed all over the country. So that's where I challenge them to come back into here and discuss this with us before they go vote.
Our state legislators have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution of the state of Tennessee, which says that they are to provide a free and equitable education. If we have failing schools, those schools have got to be fixed. Giving a limited number of students some other alternative is accepting failure. Our state legislators, with a vote for vouchers, are accepting failure and waving the white flag and giving up on education. And that is what's unacceptable. It's so unacceptable that if they choose to do that on Thursday, it should be challenged as unconstitutional according to the state of Tennessee, because the mandate is a free and equitable public education. Last year, the governor gave $97 million for teachers' raises, 20,000 opportunity scholarships that they want to call school choice, 20,000 opportunity scholarships at $6,000 apiece, and 6 years from now, who knows how much it'll be, not $6,000 apiece, is $120 million. We only scraped together $97 million for teacher raises last year, and the state legislators are looking at giving away $120 million that we need in order to answer the call for public education.
That might be a really good headline. I'm just saying. I won't add, all of those things, very well said, and anybody else, and there'll be, have more conversation tomorrow evening, but the point is, if those schools are so appalling, why are they not stepping in to help those schools? Taking students out is not the help that they need.
And don't the legislators from Rutherford County know some of the best ideas about public education? If this is something that's not going to visit our county because our educational system is so excellent here in Rutherford County, which it is, then why are our legislators not championing the ideas for public education that reside here in Rutherford County in order to fix things in Memphis? Instead, they're yielding to some out-of-state private interest that purports that they will be a success and have no evidence whatsoever that they will succeed.
Could you say that last part one more time just to make sure?
They have no evidence that they will succeed. Rutherford County, we know how to succeed. Why are our legislators not championing what we do here?
We should be the benchmark.
I have two questions that I would ask. One is, the purpose they say to you is to help the kids in the lowest 5% of school district. That's what they'll tell you. That's the reason, and we owe it to them. In their law, it says, if after all possible matches of eligible students with participating schools have been made, there are scholarships still available, the remaining scholarships will be awarded to eligible students. So if we don't spend all of this money up here that's listed in the number of scholarships, then anything remaining can be picked up by students who are not in the lowest 5%. But I thought our purpose was to address the lowest 5%. You're doing that. That's question number one. My question number two is another interesting one. The lowest 5% of the school districts, the last identified was in 14. They are identified for 3 years, 83 of them across the state. Did you know that 12 of those are in the state's own achievement school district? The ASD, the state authorized charter schools. Here's my question. Can those parents take the voucher money for that and go somewhere else themselves? Haven't seen that written anywhere.
Well, and if I may, Mr. Odeman, you make a couple of really good points that when you look at and they say, okay, well, it's just for these students. That's part of what we're hearing back from the legislators. You know, that kind of pat you on the head and say, look, we're just doing it for these kids, much like the special education voucher bill last year. Well, yes and no, because of exactly what you just said. Where are the dollars going to go if they don't get used? And also the fact that, I kind of lost my train of thought there, the fact that it goes back in, they can use it anywhere. Yes, it does come to Murfreesboro. And both of those bills, we all know, just kind of, they crack the door open. So it's real easy for us to say now, yeah, this is all it's going to be used for. We're full of fine intents and purposes, but then it turns into a runaway freight train like we've seen already happen in other states, where you've got dollars that are going in to fund private religious schools that in many cases don't have to accept those children to begin with. So even if you do have a child from a 5% school with a parent that can manage to come up with the rest of the money and say, take my child, the private school doesn't have to take them. And quite frankly, from a taxpayer standpoint, again, totally being a supporter of private schools for parents that need them and can afford them, I particularly have a hard time with my tax dollars going to pay for a religious school. Again, that's where I think we come into the constitutionality of this whole thing. So anyway, I'm going to hush.
What was our property tax last year? I mean, we're gonna see that double if we go down this path.
It would be very impactful. I'd say we might have some more conversation before this, for this week.
Well-
is out. Did you have something else, Mr.?
That money will have to be replaced, and if it's replaced, the double may not do it. If it's not replaced, then we are in serious trouble. I wonder if Memphis will help us out.
Mr. Holliday, anything on federal relations?
I'm going to speak to this tonight and won't have anything tomorrow night because there's really no board action that's required. But I wanted to raise to the board's attention that in the wake of the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is in place now, replacing No Child Left Behind, and gives direction to the Department of Education. Our anticipation would be, okay, now the Department of Education has direction, they have legislative action that they're to follow, except that the Department of Education makes it a practice to write what they call Dear Colleague letters. Now, sometimes these letters are appropriate and helpful because they interpret the law, they interpret the policies, and they give insight into how to actually put them into practice in the classroom. But you have to understand that these letters are coming from bureaucrats that are 12 steps away from the classroom. And yet the judicial system uses these letters routinely as a precedent and you know, things that empower their decisions and their interpretations because they come from the Department of Education. What I wanted to point out to my fellow board members is that whether we're talking about Amy Wise or Shirley Bell or Richard Zago or our director Don Odom, and they're not limited to just those people, but that's the kind of the chain of people that I'm familiar with on some recent Dear Colleague letters. Uniquely in Rutherford County, I believe uniquely, we take every one of those Dear Colleague letters incredibly seriously. And we examine them for whether or not they are actually applicable to the classroom. And when they're not, we challenge them. And we send back the comments, we send back the feedback that then goes to the Commissioner of Education in the state of Tennessee and back to the Department of Education. Without that challenge, then these, in effect, become judicial precedent and, in effect, law. It's incumbent upon those that are frontline people in education to see these Dear Colleague letters and respond to them appropriately. And I just wanted to point out that as we consider who gets what position, how these positions go in the future, it is incredibly important for all of our central office staff to have a local focus and to understand exactly what's going on in our classrooms here in Rutherford County. But it is equally important that we have strategic people salted through our central office that are aware of the things that are happening at the federal government, because someday soon they will be a weapon used against us to overreach from the federal government. So that's what I have. I have a couple of these Dear Colleague letters here. Any other board members who'd like to review them? They're horribly complicated. They refer to all kinds of policy and you know, back to this one and refers back to that one, and they're terribly technical. And I'm so grateful for all of the central office staff and Mr. Odom's expertise to be able to interpret these and understand them. But I can't say enough about how important it is and how it impacts our county. It's once again an example of where Rutherford County, specifically Rutherford County schools, are the pebble in the pond that ripples throughout the world of public education.
Thank you, Mr. Holliday, and want, on behalf of the board, thank Chairman Hodge and Mr. Holliday for serving in these special positions of keeping up with state and federal legislation, because it truly is complicated, and we understand. So again, thank you on behalf of the board for willing to serve. General discussion by board members. We've had quite a bit already. Mr. Jordan?
The study on when we teach world religions was going to be conducted by the State Board of Education. Is that correct?
Now, there's about 4 bills in the legislature.
There's legislation to this effect.
It is, and there's a number of bills in there. One moves it to high school. Another one kind of puts it back in your court as a school board. But there's and I don't know which ones have traction yet. I do think something will probably come out, but I just don't know.
I couldn't remember who published or announced the timeline for that. It may have been a specific piece of legislation, or it may have come from the State Department of Education. And I'm not defending any book or anything like that, or condemning one for that matter. But there was considerable discussion that the state wanted to hold some meetings, committees, so forth, to discuss moving the teaching of all world religions to high school, right?
That's a bill.
Okay.
Right now, the state has opened up the comment period for the public to come in and make comments about this, and it could be exactly that. A parent or a public might come in and make the comment, don't teach religion till high school. Teachers can go in, parents can go in. It's at the state website, and there may be a link on our website to it. I don't know, James, is it? It is. So, I mean, if any parent in our district or Rutherford County is watching, listening to us, wants to go and comment on the standards, you certainly may do so. The date was that they'll be reviewed, and then the actual implementation, though, is like 1819 or 1718. It's about 2 years out.
Right.
Before it goes through the process and the new standards are approved.
And I think it's 3 years out. I believe it's 2019. So if we were, and I'm not arguing that we should move it to high school or not or anything like that. I was just thinking, perhaps selfishly, that first of all, perhaps it should be moved. I said perhaps. I don't know. And perhaps it should be moved to high school. And if I thought when I first encountered this last fall that they were going to meet in the spring, and I foolishly thought, well, the government might move reasonably fast with this, and if they decide to move it, perhaps that could take effect, next fall with the next school year. But clearly, the state is in no hurry. 2019, which sounds suspiciously to me like they would like to move that back to the local school boards, to let them make up their mind as to what they want to do. And that's a typical state attitude, I guess, toward yet another problem. Like I say, I don't know which side to fall on yet. I don't know, but it is possible. It should be considered. Be sure and quote me right, that perhaps we're teaching this subject too early. It should be considered and discussed by the people that know.
I think if the bill passes, I think it will trump that deadline, and whatever the bill states as the starting date will become effective. Last year, they passed a piece of legislation that if you want to know what the syllabus is, what materials are being used with your child, you as a parent can go into your school, talk to your teacher, and look at that. They passed that. There's another piece of legislation this year from a cost and a time standpoint that puts it back in your court, simply says, and it's one of the ones that's listed in your packet here,
Yep.
But it basically says that for the subjects of math, English language arts, social studies, and science, for every grade that you have to develop a syllabus, and the state board of it, and you as a board are going to have to approve this syllabus and when it's taught. But let me tell you why that's a bad idea. Now you got in place, the parents can go ask. I can't write a syllabus that matches really well in one of my Title I schools that the kids need a lot of review that will fit Central Magnet School. So if you got 4 subjects over ever how many grades we're talking about, how many different versions are we gonna have of this? Again, the process is already in place. And any parent that has a concern can go to their school and teacher and find out. So why we put another level or layer in, and again, I think it's people not understanding how education works with kids that are, some that are behind, some that are advanced, and how that syllabus needs to look different for each of those cases. And so that, I don't know, my real summary is, I kind of wish sometimes legislatures wouldn't practice education. Okay, I mean, that's when just anybody that I don't need to practice being a doctor, then maybe sometimes you shouldn't practice.
Mr. Hodge included this on it's page 1 of 2. It's at the bottom. It's House Bill 1905. And when I read this in the newspaper, I thought one word occurred to me, the disaster. And boy, you talk about something time-consuming.
We'd have to pay teachers to come in here to create that over the summer. You're talking about a cost, plus it won't fit everybody. That's my problem.
Mr. Hodge?
Are you done with this?
I think so, yes.
I'm just gonna, look, I'm just gonna compliment whoever, did the fact book.
Oh, yeah.
Just well done. I was just looking at it here earlier. I just got a question, because I'm just interested in knowing. On page, I think it's interesting, if you read it, going back page 15, you see where McFadden's the first school we had, 1938. Would that be right?
McFadden is the only school that we own. Campus School is actually older, but we don't own the physical building, so it's not on the list.
Okay, just looking at this, and this is just curiosity. I just made a couple notes here. When was Las Casas in Kittrell started? You know?
Yes, let me find it for you.
I see where the elementaries, where they were built.
This is the new addition, I think. Both of those were much, much older, but those buildings no longer exist.
Yeah.
The old,
The former
the
buildings
original.
are on this list, but the current building would be 1993 for Las Casas.
Yeah, I'm just curious on the other ones, because I really never knew. When,
My mother went to one of them, and so you're in the early 1900s, so I can tell you.
Well, Seminary Elementary still exists. It's just a house now. It's not a,
So is Milton.
not a school. Well, there you go.
You know anybody that went there? And
You know, by chance I do. By chance I do.
but anyhow, it's a good job done,
Yeah.
and it's informative reading, so.
Consider yourself patted on the back, Mr. Evans. Very, very well done. Good.
We'll share this with Leadership Rutherford tomorrow. It's the education day.
Mr. Young, who's chairman of the Facility Use Committee, has asked for a policy meeting, and Ms. Michaels and Ms. McLeod have gotten together, so we'll have a policy meeting to go along with facilities, and I think there's some other action too. Is that right, Ms. McLeod? Okay, so we've got some other action. So, Mr. Young, thank you for chairing that. That was a tedious process, and Mr. Jordan, thank you for serving, and all the other members. I sat in on most of the meetings, and again, very well done, and a little time consuming, but we knew it would be kind of an arduous process, and y'all did a great job. So thank you, and you'll bring forth that at our policy meeting. So, okay. Mr. Odom, go ahead.
A couple of things real quickly. After the Health and Education Committee kind of deferred for a month, basically to take it up, they wanted to study it more. They said they would like to have had more time to look at it. And some of the information that I gave in the growth for the county, that presentation that you saw. So I thought what I would do is I will probably go to the full commission on the 11th, and we'll put a copy of that basically on the desk of every one of the county commissioners, and probably Mr. Evans would be a good night to put a copy of the fact book on their desk also. And also, they asked us that night to try to set a time where those that would like to could go visit some of those buildings. You need to see David Urey, where a restroom's been converted into a teaching area. You need to see some of the things that we've got at Smyrna Middle. So, but we need to get that in before the committees start meeting. The 29th will be the Health and Ed. So we've looked at Saturday the 20th, and so probably if we get everything worked out with the principals and all, I will tell them that night, invite them if they would like to, and certainly board members, you may want to come and rub shoulders with them too. We'll take a look at the additions we had, and we'll do Smyrna Middle, we'll do the David Urey change. Should take them out and let them see Rocky Fork, where that's been cleared and done. For time, we might run by John Coleman, as Mr. Cardy says we may be pouring slab there, starting on that right away, so that'll be a good thing. But this will allow any commissioner who is interested a chance to come and see it and hear what we're doing and from the people that are in the school. So we'll follow through with that. And
Anybody have anything else?
on that one, I got one other thing, but if you anything else on that?
It's been so effective in the past. It is so significant. The county commission helps us so much.
They are good to us.
Yeah, it's worth our time and effort. Take them as many times as they ask.
Mr. Chairman, couple of things that on this topic. That 29th meeting that he just gave you on Health and Ed is a different date than they usually meet.
They moved it.
Yeah.
Somebody was out.
So that's not a mistake. That is the 29th. And the second thing I want to discuss at some point. We don't have to discuss it now, but this is the proper time, right? I guess.
Yes, sir.
And that is the Smyrna Laverne bleachers, restrooms, and concession stands. I don't know what we're going to do here. I'd like to at least get that on the agenda again in discussion as to what we need to do. And I'm gonna keep talking till you stop me, Mr. Chairman. It's fairly obvious to me that they're not going to pass this. I'm sorry.
I said we could add that to the tour.
Well, hey, but Mr. Blair and I just took the tour, and I don't think there's any question that we have made our point repeatedly on this, and security and so forth, and I just don't think that's going. It's just not going to happen. I don't believe. Should we continue to ask for it and let them cut it, which they have every right to do? And I think by putting us off and tabling this whole thing for a month, by the way, was a very good idea, because you presented a lot of material to them, and they wanted the Health and Ed wanted time to study it, and I don't blame them for that at all. I just don't believe that I just don't believe they're going to pass this. And Mr. Gurley spoke, I thought, quite eloquently on it. He made it very clear that he was not going to vote for it. And I don't happen to agree with him necessarily, but I can certainly see the point that he is making, which was, and this is my reason for bringing it up, which was, he said, I think I'm quoting him exactly right. He said that he was not going to vote for that as long as we needed classrooms. And I see his point, and I'm really not disagreeing with him necessarily. So I guess my question is, we've got $2 million here that we're not going to spend. That's not the problem. The problem was where it's going. So what are we going to do with the $2 million? We ought to put it somewhere. And that's just my feeling. If they don't want to use it for what we kind of thought was a priority, and okay, all right, then, never discount the fact that you could be wrong. Maybe that money needs to go somewhere else.
Artie, did you?
I was going to say that if in fact you want to move it, I have a preliminary estimate on Smyrna Middle now that I didn't have originally. Once we walked it with the principal and really took a very close, detailed look at the project. We have plumbing that needs to be changed up there in some of the other parts of the building. And also, we need to, the way I have it right now at $6 million, we're going to have to ignore the library piece of it. So if we could shift that $2 million over to that project, that would certainly help things matters there with Smyrna Middle School.
Well, I'm glad I brought it up. Let's get it on the agenda. I know it can't go tomorrow night, but it can go the next time, which is fairly soon. Go ahead.
No, are you finished?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Hodge?
I'll just say, and I'm pretty adamant about it, I preached this thing for the last 6 or 8 years, and I still contend, well, number one, we're gonna take tours, let's take them at nighttime, is the first thing. We're gonna show them facilities, let's go nighttime, but I still go back that these 2 schools, they deserve the same thing that these other schools deserve. So, as far as I'm concerned, just as one board member, the next high school we build it without any stands and concessions. We take care of their needs, then we'll come back and play catch up with the new schools. I mean, I'll contend, and you're gonna have a rough time to convince me different, that these people need it, and it's a matter of time before you have a crisis down there. And once you have the crisis, see what it costs you. And I mean, that's, you know, I would challenge these people to go down there. You know, I'm in favor of classrooms also, but I'm also in favor of doing what's right too. And that's just my opinion.
I think every commissioner needs to see those 2 areas, because until you stand in the middle of it and throng of people that pack into those 2 areas, and we're blessed by having very competitive athletic teams with great stakeholders and followers, but that makes an issue, Mr. Holliday?
If this board interprets that we have a safety concern at those 2 football facilities, then I believe it's incumbent upon us to keep this line item on our recommendation, because, as Chairman Hodge says, if we have an issue, our request has been clear and consistent.
Yes, sir. And it certainly has been, we have certainly been consistent in making that issue known to our funding body.
At the same time, if the estimate's coming in that we need 7.5, 7.8, whatever it is for Smyrna Middle, let's not be shy about making that adjustment. We consistently bring to Health Ed and the County Commission accurate numbers. If we need to adjust those numbers, I believe those folks at the county courthouse will understand if we make an adjustment. Let's not ignore something that's come up tonight, and yet at the same time be absolutely consistent in our message to the county commission that we have a safety concern at these 2 football facilities.
No member of the committee spoke in favor of that at all, or commented on what Mr. Gurley said. And again, I want to make sure, Mr. Gurley, I don't know him very well, but I don't want him to be upset with me. This was his opinion, and classrooms to him, okay. I mean, I'm with, I understand that. We clearly, the security issue that both of you have raised here is not going to go away. And I don't know how many years it'll take us to ever get this passed, but the security issue is not going to disappear. And I think that concession stands and restrooms are more important, to me at least, than the actual bleachers. Because if you had those things on the visitor's side, it would stop the crowd from going to the other side, which is where, if I would think, if you're going to have a problem, that would be what would happen. And we did tour, Mr. Blair and I did, but all of you've been there before many times probably. And Mr. Ash, I'll call him by name, he took us all over that campus, and he's absolutely desperate for some things around his football field and concession stand and restrooms, which are in, he needs a lot more, and it's pretty obvious, and Mr. Hodges is right, you know, when you have that tour, that needs to be addressed.
Anybody else? Well, I think we covered a lot. Oh, okay. What other thing, Mr. Holden?
You know, Rutherford County continues to build buildings at less dollars per square foot than our neighboring counties. We have geothermal. We put in lighting that saves money, saving features in our plumbing and all. Tonight you saw a change order that comes back and brought money back to us. And part of that is the team that Mr. Clardy and that department has built that are on site, seeing what the contractor's doing and the quality that's put into it. So he's building that team. So he has had a position. We had a retirement on that team over the Christmas holidays. And so he's interviewed and he's selected an individual. And you have a policy, your policy 1.108, which basically says, whenever a person is considered by the director of schools for initial employment in the system, and that person is related to a member of the board, the director of schools, an administrator in the system, a county commissioner, or any appointed or elected county official, that's a whole lot of people. The relationship shall be publicly made known to the board prior to the employment of such person. So Mr. Clardy has one that certainly has the credentials, but I'm going to let him share with you who that might be so that we meet the conditions of your policy.
As Mr. Odom has said, we had Jackie Holden to retire, and he's been with us for about 25 years. He's 68 now. So a good, seasoned construction man. And so I interviewed, and I made a decision to hire Andrew Hodge. He has a concrete degree from Middle Tennessee. Counting his education, he's got almost 10 years of experience. He has a construction background. He's working for a company called Gray Contracting and was doing a job in Michigan for him as a site supervisor. So bringing him aboard will bring all of my entire staff up to a college degree, and even my secretary has a degree in construction technology or associate degree. So that'll bring us all in with an education, and I think he'll do a great job. I've checked all his references. Everyone has nothing but good things to say about him, and I was surprised. Usually when you hire people, a lot of times once they move on, no one in the company knows them, but everyone from the secretaries up to the vice presidents of these companies knew him and recommended him. So we're be glad to bring him on with our construction team on February the 8th, and we're really looking forward to having him.
I've always been impressed with your ability to judge talent, Mr. Clardy, and certainly support your selection, and you continue to hit home runs, so just keep doing what you're doing, please.
Thank
you. We've had a lot of conversation tonight. If you're not all talked out, maybe we'll have some time tomorrow night. But Again, we're meeting tomorrow evening rather than our normally scheduled Thursday board meeting, and we don't have anything else. We stand adjourned.